Hello and welcome back to Sinews of War. In the previous episode we saw the conclusion of the very poorly fought battle by the Polish main force against one of our fortifications, where we were eventually victorious. We had to lose Jerusalem to the Ottoman Empire after abandoning it, so an expected loss, but we're getting ready to come back as Voss has teamed up with General Courtland to occupy Egypt, and from there should have a strong base to now go back into the Ottoman territory. We also took Lithuania from Poland-Lithuania, further weakening them, so they're really on the back foot now. In India, a force sallied out against our besieging army. It theoretically had a balanced force, but actually was absolutely annihilated by our men, so that war goes better and better. Then we had another theoretically balanced battle with New Spain at Caracas, but it turned out that we had just about every possible advantage in the book, including an advantage of knowing what we're doing. So victory was ours. The king sends his endless congratulations for your achievements thus far, gentlemen, and I have already written back to him to inform him of the imminence of your further success. He has many plans, the good king, plans beyond that which he passes through the States General, I gather, and you men will be central to those efforts if you can prove yourselves in this campaign. But before all that, you must take pride in what you are doing for our company. The wealth of India has waited long to be our reward, and now we shall put it to work to ensure that Asia is every bit as profitable as the Americas. The East Indies are ours for the most part, as you know, and I have sent your old colleague Kieft with a fleet to restore our rule in Eastern Africa. If you can secure India for me, you will cement the company's place in history. And of course you will never go wanting for anything, even if the thing you want is a place at the side of the king. For the great, anything can be arranged. In the meantime, I must ask you both to write privately to the king to express the depth of your loyalty to him. His Majesty grows paranoid when his servants achieve great things so far from his reach. I have assured him that I have everything under control and am proceeding according to his will, but if you would let him know the same, I'm sure the whole matter would be dropped at once. Keep foremost in your mind that royal favour is one of the many things we have that the West India Company doesn't, so you would do well to consider its preservation a keystone of our business strategy from now on. So we're just in the aftermath of our resounding victory against New Spain. They don't have much else in the area, just an annoying priest there converting our guys in North America to Catholicism. Now in the Mughal Empire turn, look at this cheeky move. They somehow attack the settlement I had under siege and take it, forcing my armies back. Here's the instant replay on the cheeky cam. I've never seen that happen. I didn't even know you could attack somewhere that's already under siege by another faction. And we're not allied to the Mughals either anyway, so it's not that explaining. I have no idea what is going on there, but that's incredibly annoying. We had that place under siege for like 5 turns and suddenly the Mughals have swept in and taken it, and now we are not going to tolerate this absolute insubordination and true cheekiness indeed. We're going to have to declare war on the Mughals, not only to take revenge for this, but in order to continue our India campaign, because we're now just up against their border. So I was checking their diplomatic situation. They are allied with the Ottomans and with Persia, and Persia seemed to be one of my natural enemies. They themselves also allied to the Ottomans, so I wasn't too worried about annoying those guys, and indeed the Persians actually joined the Mughals in a war against me, as do the Ottomans. So the war has been started. We always knew we'd go to war with the Mughals, since they're even more of our natural enemy than the Maratha, who were much weaker to begin with. But it's time to get things going. So we're going to attack Hyperabad first. I annoyingly can't quite reach it with the whole army. I can walk right up to it. There are basically no defenders inside. So I thought what we'll do here is just split the force up and attack with the faster units. So Costa moves forward and starts the siege, but I forgot a lesson I'd learned earlier in the campaign, which is you can't make a siege attack unless the besieging army has at least 1 infantry unit in it. So we can just move all the infantry over into that army. Now we can attack, and the guns still get involved because they are reinforcements, and the settlement actually just surrenders anyway. So there we go, the first Mughal settlement captured. It's really damaged thanks to our troops looting the place, but it's going to be an important move since it is fortified. So now we have a nice strong position to resist any Mughal counterattacks against our Indian territories. The place is worth nothing, so we're not going to tax it, try and help with the economic development. So now we need to swoop back in and finish that siege once and for all by just forcing the Mughal defenders to surrender. And there we go. We take this place without a fight. Going to start upgrading it as well because it's in terrible condition. So there we go. The war with the Mughals has started. 2 very quick victories. It depends where their main forces are. I presume they're further north fighting with the Maratha who used to be up there. We shall see. And now since we have new wars, I need to check all the trade theatres to see if we're about to be attacked by anyone. The Mughals do have a trade fleet here in Western Africa, but it's too small to take my fleet, so I'm just going to leave it there basically. I'm not going to lose any money or damage my ships by actually bothering to go fight them. It's the same deal with the new Spanish fleet. You can see they're trading on the trade node. It's too small to damage me, so we're just ignoring each other to make sure we're getting the maximum trade profit. Doesn't look like there's anything in Brazil, but I'm going to find out a little bit later in the episode. That is a wrong thing to believe. They actually are in there. Anyway, before any of that, we need to make an attack on Jerusalem. Voss and Courland have been preparing for just this. And as we move up, we see the Ottomans do have a full army in the settlement, but that is no problem because a full stack of Ottoman troops is nothing compared to a full stack of the professional infantry that Voss and Courland have brought to the fight. So as we get things going, the balance bar already in our favour, but we can take out that half stack outside the city to make things extra far in our favour using the classic Total War trick, besiege the city, and now both of our armies can defeat one of theirs. They go right down, and Courland getting loads of ancillaries and trait gains here, including this Eastern Mystic, who's actually quite an interesting one. He reduces your campaign movement range, but makes you better against the Ottomans. So a strange one, perhaps not really a retainer I think we need, but not going to do anything about that for now. Let's have a look at Jerusalem. The force inside completely overwhelmed. You can see it's got lots of companies, but many of them are already damaged, so their strength is very low. I was going to ask them to surrender, but I decided actually I'd rather actually take the favourable auto resolve and destroy that army so that it can't ever replenish and come back to fight me again. So we're going to be ruthless in our advance, taking Jerusalem, strategically absolutely useless and economically useless as well, but of course of enormous religious importance both to us and the Ottomans. So important moral victory to have taken it back. Now, I was wondering whether I should start pressuring the Ottomans from Istanbul as well. There are only 2 armies currently standing on the road heading east out of Istanbul, and in the past there had been 4, so I wanted to go and check what happened to them. I'm going to move this rake over to make sure they're not still there, because they may just now be in hiding, because if they're not there, then Gaiden can finally get in on this action. Let it be known that the Holy City once again rests in the embrace of good Christian men. Let word spread that the Golden Dutch Empire, which has achieved so much, has now seen the mission of God completed. For hundreds of years, the homeland of our Saviour has been abused by those who do not even begin to understand his divinity. Finally, we shall ensure that no more youths in that cradle of civilization are corrupted by the pretender books of the fallen angels. And we can be surer than ever that God watches down onto our empire and guides it closer to its destiny, closer to its place ruling a world encased by the wings of a great white dove. Let it be known that the first great work of your king has been completed. Switching back to the Americas, we've got a little bit of business to finish at Caracas. For some reason, the remaining new Spanish troops would not surrender, so we had to destroy them in order to take the city, and that was easy enough. So there we go. We're not going to tax it since we want to build up both public order and its wealth. I noticed that Voorhees was gaining quite a few accolades as a result of the victory. He actually is the darling of the gutter press, which basically means he is very popular in the tabloids. He is a celebrity back home, so that must be nice for him. So there's a few more new Spanish territories in South America and Central America that we could go after, but Caracas was the only one that was a victory region, so that was the one we needed in this war. You can see we also need to take Goa from Portugal, our ally, might be able to buy it off them, take Hindustan from the Mughals, easy enough, and we need to get New York from the 13 colonies. Again, we may simply be able to buy that later on. I decided to check the prestige. You can see that Russia actually has more military prestige than we do, which I thought was a bit unusual considering how much conquest we've been doing. Perhaps they just have an absolutely massive army that we haven't seen yet. Now over in Mexico, I decided to force the attack on Mexico City, as it were, because the new Spanish were bringing up reinforcements. I didn't want to keep that siege going. No real reason to rush it, but I thought we might as well do that to avoid a larger battle. And the region's actually worth loads and is really massive, so it extends our territory hugely, and once we can tax it, we're going to have a lot of wealth as well. Now, every turn I've been asking Sweden for peace, and finally this time they actually do decide to end our war with them. There hasn't been any action with them for a while, so it sort of suggested they weren't feeling like they really wanted this war. So that was good, the war was finally over. I wanted to see if Poland wanted to trade, because that could increase our relationship, but they did not, but we'll come back to that in a second actually. I also wanted to see if Denmark would trade with me, and it seems that in general the Northern European powers don't really like me, and that's probably just because of my expansionism in Europe, not really a surprise. Now the Polish decided they would actually trade with me if I gave them technology, and they'd even pay me a little bit of an advance on it. But then I thought, actually, maybe I shouldn't trade with the Polish, because I'm so rich, and they're probably not, that actually it's worth me not benefiting from the trade just to stop them from benefiting from the trade. So we're going to act like an AI in most Total Wars and refuse trade for no given reason. Now, as we move on, that Persian fleet that I hinted actually was hanging around near Brazil appears from the fog of war and makes an attack against one of my trade groups. They've got lots of fifth rates, very deadly ships, and we don't have anything to match them. Some of their ships are damaged though, and I do have a lot of fluids, which always gives me hope because they have so many guns on them. The problem is that they're very inaccurate and they're very slow ships, which makes them inferior to the fifth rate, which has a similar number of guns. But anyway, I decided to give this a try. As things got started, one of the enemy's fifth rates seemed to separate off from their main line, so that was convenient. I'm going to exploit that by trying to just surround that one ship and pound it, perhaps try to take it out before the rest can engage. And I'm sending my weakest ship, my sloop, to try and capture one of the enemy's fleets. Since it doesn't have much crew on it, we might be able to just disable that ship right away. And my main line of fleets is going to go into the enemy line and sail right through it, so we can use both broadsides at once to shoot in all directions. And that went pretty well, but we didn't really manage to damage the enemy ships very much, and the problem now is going to be that we're on the wrong side of the enemy's line wind-wise and can't go back into it. First though, here's that boarding action I ordered. My sloop coming in, much smaller than the fleet, but with enough crew to take it thanks to damage on the enemy's side. The big problem though is that it's really exposed, because all the enemy ships that stayed behind in that initial advance can now actually turn in and engage with my sloop, so it's in big trouble. Meanwhile, my brig's in big trouble as well. You can see they're really damaged and considering routing as well, and haven't even done much damage to the fifth rate they engaged. I knew that the brigs were going to be inferior, but I did not expect them to just come off that badly in those engagements. The fleet's struggling to actually turn to get their guns on the enemy. The problem we always have with these ships, they turn slowly and move slowly and can't move at all if they don't have the wind. So really difficult to actually get their guns to bear on the enemy here. You see, I've finally managed to turn and get a manually fired volley. Most of the shots miss, unfortunately. So later on, this maneuver disadvantage makes things worse and worse as the enemy get upwind of me and start just curling around, firing at me with loads of ships at once, and my ship's now broken up, can't really get back into any sort of formation because of that wind. They are basically immobilized. The ships can just about turn on the spot, but they can't really move in any direction because they are too big and slow. They can't deal with this, and it's getting worse and worse. My brigs defeated, my sloop surrendered as well during that boarding action. So things definitely not going very well. There's one of my brigs routing off the field as well in another duel with the fifth rate, in which it did a bit of damage, but definitely not enough to get anywhere close to worth it being lost. So now we're going to encounter another problem, which is that the ships I do have left seem to have some sort of glitch and they won't actually fire at the enemy. You can see I was trying to use the manual fire there, tried to shoot at that distant fifth rate and failed, but now since we're turning, another fifth rate going to come into range, so I'm going to once again try and do a manually fired broadside. You can see the red line indicating where it will go, but it just cancels the broadside when I press it, and the ship's also on fire at will but isn't firing, so I don't even know what's going on. But of course this is heightening the problem for our fours. I can't actually fire back. This ship though, which is closer to the enemy, actually does fire on command, so I don't know if the manual broadside doesn't work if you're not in range. I'm pretty sure that's not how it works, and this is actually just a glitch. But anyway, as you might be able to tell at this stage, the enemy having a definitive advantage, and you can see their lines coming to curl around me. My ship's in big trouble. I said fire, damn it! Full broadside now! They're staring right at us! Captain, the men don't even have the guns run out! What? I gave them the order to fire! Is this mutiny? No, sir, they just can't hear the orders. Then go shout at them louder, you fool! No, good sir. They forgot to use earwads and all went deaf after the first couple of shots. Unbelievable! I always said that merchant sailors are as good in a fight as sacks of grain, and now it's scientifically true. New system. Go slap them in the face, point at the guns, and if they still don't get it, give a few a taste of your pistols to see if that clears things up. Attempts to get some of my ships out of the fight to save them go very poorly, the enemy literally running rings around my ships trying to escape even with the wind on my side. Unfortunately, when I give the order to withdraw, the ships want to withdraw upwind, making them basically move without any speed whatsoever. The fifth rates will be able to catch them. At this point I decided to just abandon the fight. It's a crushing defeat for our trade force, and that's particularly annoying because that was actually the second time I fought that battle. Here's what happened the first time. I had one of my sloops successfully board an enemy fleet, but it set fire, exploded, destroying itself, the fleet, and an enemy fifth rate, and damaging another fifth rate, and that really turns the fight. Meanwhile, the one ship that had come ahead of all of the rest had been totally pounded by all of my ships, and unlike in that battle, in this earlier battle, it actually went really well and sunk that ship, killing their admiral. So we were about to win the fight. The final ship just had to be taken out, and with all our ships still afloat, except for the sloop of course, that looked set to happen. Unfortunately, as you can see, the game actually froze in the middle of the battle. So basically the first time it went just about as well as I could have hoped, and the second time it went just about as badly as I could have hoped, and I decided not to give it a third go, to see if we could at least get a more middling result. I just took the crushing defeat and the loss of that trade fleet and the trade node, in fact. So the Persians going to be able to occupy if they want, but they've got other ideas. They are just going to attack every single trade fleet in Brazil, and that one they fought just now was the most powerful of our fleets, so every other fleet has a much worse chance. So I'm not going to take any engagements here. We are just going to abandon every trade node, which is a massive shame because there are so many powers hanging around here. You can see Quebec and Denmark sitting there, who will just come in and take all the trade nodes the second I'm off them. So although I've managed to preserve my trade fleet, so we'll be able to band together and perhaps take back one or two of the nodes, we won't be able to regain our monopoly without declaring war on people. Now the Mughal Empire offer me an outrageous peace deal where I give them loads of territory. I'm going to throw that out the window. In exchange, they send one unit to invade my territory, and they steal one of those Brazilian trade nodes, and their main fleet comes to blockade my port at Ceylon. Not a huge deal since we're not trading too much out of that port. So quickly back to Brazil, I'm going to combine all of these fleets together. So now I actually have a more formidable force. It just has loads of really weak or damaged ships in it. It's not a proper war fleet. Now I considered just going after the Persians right now, but I thought actually it might be better to just take the unoccupied trade node there. And then I realized actually we could go and have a look at that Mughal fleet. It's only got 2 ships in it, so we might as well get a bit of revenge, because either way here we're going to take a trade node, but if we take this one, we're also denying the Mughals one of theirs. So we'll be slightly weakening one of our enemies, and we'll even capture one of their ships, so that will actually make us a bit more money from occupying the node. Now I considered splitting the fleet to occupy both, but the problem there is that the Persians would be able to attack the split fleet, and that might go okay. So what I'm going to do is send Kalimba's main fleet down to just clear up the whole area. That fleet's still really damaged. I still haven't repaired it after its decisive battle because it cost so much money and just haven't managed to have the spare cash for it. So on they go. And on the subject of repairing, we need to repair up Caracas here and indeed start replenishing Voorhees' men inside. So I need to decide what to do with all these forces here. I don't need to do anything technically because we've achieved our victory objectives in the southern part of this theatre. So there's nothing they have to do, but I thought we might as well put pressure on New Spain. We could try and get peace with them now, but I thought, well, we probably have an advantage. Might as well just take some more and try and take all of South America at the very least. Now over at the Straits of Madagascar, some trade ships have arrived to replace the war fleet led by Kieft that was occupying them all. So now our warships can head back towards India, which is going to be quite useful, so we can try and break that blockade from the Mughals that we saw just a minute ago. Now, back over near Jerusalem, I'm arranging the forces to go and make a new attack against the Ottomans. The plan here is to have Voth besiege Damascus here, doing the same trick we did against Jerusalem, where the small force outside is now isolated by the siege, so that Cordon can come in and just annihilate that force, with Voth coming as reinforcements. So we get rid of those guys, easy enough. And now the stack inside going to be in a little bit of trouble. The question was whether we want to attack it right now. There are no fortifications, which is going to help us out quite a lot, but this army is in better condition than the one inside Jerusalem. I think though it's actually worse in terms of its composition. It's got some trashier units in it, and the balance bar so far in our favour that after a long period of consideration, I decided we could just auto-resolve and take this. I was a tiny bit worried it might give us more losses than we deserve, but actually the results seemed fine to me. So there we go, we've now taken Syria. Going to quickly repair up the public order buildings as soon as possible. Need to do the same thing over in Jerusalem, actually, where the buildings are completely wrecked, but public order is stable. They don't seem too unhappy about us occupying them, even with no garrison. The question now is, where are the rest of their forces? We found one of their stacks at Ankara, but I wanted to check, as I mentioned earlier, whether they'd moved out from their position near Istanbul, and it seems they haven't. They've still got a big presence here, so I'm still thinking it's not really worth pushing against them with my inferior force here. We might as well just keep waiting. Sticky. I think that's the best word to sum it all up. The men from colonies further east are tolerant of it, but everyone who came down from North America complains without halt at all hours. I, for one, am happy to hear such vocal outbursts, for it is a sign that a far worse problem has not set in, the much talked about suite of diseases the jungles have to offer. Most at risk are those blasted scribes from Amsterdam, constantly questioning and noting every detail of my action, down to the direction I face in the latrine. Somewhere, someone is enthralled by this information, I am sure. It will be fun to return home and compare those accounts to this one, and see how the truth by the press, the accepted truth, differs from the real truth. Over in India, I wanted to put some more pressure on the Mughals, so I'm getting forces ready to attack. De Beer's going to head over to that road on the western coast and then head north into the Mughal territory. We are going to be ignoring that Maratha army that's just standing there. It's just a few units, and we're literally just going to bypass it and hope it doesn't do too much damage if it wants to raid or something, because I really want to blitzkrieg the Mughals before they start assembling lots of forces, which they may have the capacity to do, and Costa as well, just going to advance right towards their territory. Can't take anything right now, but getting closer. We also have a reserve army, which we do need to deploy at some point. It's being used for public order purposes right now, so we need to recruit some militia or something to do that job instead, just gradually creeping them up to the front lines. But soon we'll have a third army to advance as well. Now in the Ottoman turn, they do actually fall back from their position near Istanbul, so finally the circumstances I need to make my attack there seem to have arisen. But there is a major problem that's actually going to stop me from doing that. We're at war with Russia once again, so that big military prestige we saw is about to be tested. We're going to see just how many armies they've actually been building up. I realised I don't really need to call my allies into this war, because they're basically all at war with Russia already, so no need to put pressure on any who aren't to actually join and make sure they stay on our side. So the Russians begin their attacks, moving into Ukraine with an army there. A fleet destroys one of my allied fleets from the Italian states, and then it goes on to blockade one of my ports, and they start moving forces down into the territory I captured from Poland, Lithuania, which has very little defences there. They're also moving up towards St. Petersburg, probably hoping to recapture it. So a lot going on in that in-turn sequence. Let's go through all the things we need to do. First, Kiev has now arrived in India, where we need to defeat the Mughal fleet that is currently blockading Ceylon. I realised though what I should do is actually head to this shipyard which is nearby and repair the fleet and add a ship or two into it first, just to guarantee our victory, because we're not actually making much money from Ceylon, so it doesn't matter that it's being blockaded, and it's just keeping the Mughal fleet busy while it sits there blockading. We can see it, we know what it's doing. It's not up to mischief. We can just use all of the other ports in the area to build up a massive opposition to it. Now, also on the topic of fleets, Kalamba has arrived near Brazil, where we want to destroy the Persians. So they're still there on the trade nodes. We can come in with our full fleet. Our fleet damaged, of course, but so is theirs, so we win without any losses. Going to capture 2 of the ships, which I will take, so that we can add those to the trading fleet as well. So that's very nice. The 2 ships I just captured will occupy the trade node, so they're basically keeping their old jobs that they had under the Persians. And unfortunately, there's no other nodes to take. All 3 of the other remaining ones I don't have just been taken by other powers now. So we have lost our monopoly in Brazil, thanks to the annoying actions of the Persians there. I'm going to split this trade fleet up in order to distribute the ships more evenly, because you get more income that way. And for Kalimba, I considered sending him over to the west coast of Africa, where there are some more Mughals and some new Spanish we could destroy. But first I thought, let's just send him back to a home port so that we can actually repair his fleet before it sees any more action. So we're going to continue our advances in India, forcing some Mughals to surrender and taking the settlement, which is absolutely worthless. It's worth 0, so we are not going to tax it. That will start building up its economy. So a pointless region. We can use it for military recruitment if we really want, but otherwise it's just on paper. So the same thing going to happen for De Beer, just going to advance into enemy territory. This time though, he actually runs out of movement points right in front of this settlement, which is really annoying. We're going to jiggle it around to force a siege by getting the guns out of the army. And I was actually surprised by how far in the enemy's favour the balance bar was. I assumed this would be another case where I can just demand surrender and then he would leave. But it's because they have those 4 units outside the town. So I thought I'll just leave the siege going and see if those units go away, because if they do, then the place probably will just surrender. Now against the Ottomans, although I was a tiny bit worried they might attack me from the east, I'm going to mostly abandon the territory I've just taken in order to push as hard as I can towards Ankara, which is their capital right now, and where they're concentrating most of their forces. So we can destroy their armies, destroy their economy, since Ankara is a really, really rich province, and hopefully that will mean the Ottomans are basically down and out, and we can just finish them off at our leisure. So now it's time to look at the Russian war situation. They're blockading this port on this island, which I didn't even realise I owned, but I'm willing to let them do that since I'm not using the port for anything. And it's the land armies that are going to be causing trouble anyway, so that's what we're going to keep an eye on. So as I mentioned, they've got forces heading all over the place into our Polish territories. 2 armies there coming up towards St. Petersburg. We have our own army there, which has come back from the front with Sweden, so it's really lucky we've got that peace with Sweden. They've also got a small army at Riga, so we can't go and steal that as I had originally intended during my first Russian campaign. They've got a main force heading towards Kiev, but my force is heading back from the war with Poland. They're able to occupy the fortifications there now, so that's going to dramatically reduce the probability of having to give ground there, but it does dramatically increase the probability we're going to have to give ground in the newly captured regions such as Lithuania. So nothing we can do really to actually stop the Russians attacking if they want, so we're just going to sit there. And now after all this time building up to guidance attack on the Ottoman territories, on the very eve of it actually happening, he's going to have to cancel that plan and bring his main force north to try and reinforce our positions there in the east against Russia. His reserve army going to stay behind the weaker army just in case the remaining Ottoman stacks do actually come back to try and restore their former capital to their rule, and I'm pretty sure they would fail if they tried with my reserve stack there, so that's all fine. So now in the Russian turn, what I feared would happen does actually happen. They're just going to storm all of my territories here, and nothing we can do to stop them. We get these tiny garrisons. The Russians don't even offer us a chance to surrender. They are just going to annihilate the citizenry and militia who rise up to be the garrison. This battle a tiny bit better than the last one. I was looking at this and thinking there might actually be a way to win this if we rely on AI glitchiness, but we are not going to bother. They will take the territory and they actually just abandon it right away. I think the AI tends to do quite curiously. So now their main force comes to attack Kiev, and because my force got there in time, we are actually going to have a pretty decent chance of resisting this one. We've got the fortifications on our side, the enemy's army more powerful than ours in theory, but of course it's going to be relying on the siege AI, so I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to grind out a victory and at least hold some territory here. Many in Central Europe were calling for the Dutch to complete their conquest of Poland-Lithuania. The wars between Prussia, Hanover and the Polish had been raging for a decade, with both sides being drained of manpower by the regular large battles. The people could no longer trust their leaders with their lives, and saw what remained of the democratic system in the United Provinces to be a relative dream. But the Dutch Empire was not as strong as these grassroots activists might have hoped. Kept busy by the Ottomans and giving ground fast to the Russians, Central Europe was now the least of their many concerns. The wars then were set to continue, with the arrival of Russian and British forces promising fresh slaughter for both sides. So thanks for watching. We'll see the battle at Kiev and other engagements against Russia in the next episode of Sinews of War.